Prosperity is a great blessing, but it is slippery ground. The problem with prosperity, and especially the prosperity of the wicked, is that a man or woman without faith in God who prospers will usually become blind to reality. His money will make him feel secure, and that is a slippery place.
Welcome to Open the Bible with Pastor Colin Smith. I'm David Pick, and Colin, it sounds like we're going to be talking about money today.
Actually, it's not. We're in a series called I Almost Gave Up, and this is all about those times when a Christian may feel absolutely overwhelmed and tempted towards despair. And this happened to a very godly man by the name of Asaph, and one of the reasons he was tempted to give up was he looked at the world and he said, now, people who are in rebellion against God, wicked people, God seems to be blessing them. They've got all the money. And here am I, and I'm trying to be faithful to God, and it seems like my prayers are not being answered. Well, there's many Christians who know what that is. Why is God blessing the wrong people? And why is he doing something for people who are defiant towards him? And they seem to get away with everything. And what is God doing for me? Well, these are questions of discouragement. And if you're asking these questions, you're certainly not the first. Asaph was there before, and he had to work through these questions. And God brought him through these questions and put his feet back on a solid place. And the prayer for this series is that God will do that for us also.
So I hope you'll be able to join us today in your Bible in Psalm 73 as we continue the message, Think. Here's Colin.
The encouragement of God's people is one of the great means that God uses to strengthen us when we feel like giving up. By the way, that is why you should never withdraw from God's people when you're discouraged. See, when we become discouraged, there is a certain impetus that says, hey, I'll just stay home. I'm not going to come to worship. No, I'll just withdraw. And isolation is your greatest danger when you're discouraged. You need others around you. We all do. And Asaph does the right thing. He not only goes to a sanctuary where he finds the presence of the ark that speaks to him of God's faithfulness over generations, he comes to the place where he's going to meet with others who share the same faith and are able to encourage and strengthen one another in God. God will use his people to bring strength and encouragement to you. And sometimes that will happen in the most unexpected of ways. Let me speak personally. Let me tell you how God blessed me last Sunday. Dick Bender. Dick's one of our senior members. He's been through very extensive surgery. He's a man of extraordinary courage. Last Sunday, we just finished the third service. I had my coat on, was about to head out through the main entrance there, head off home. Got to the front door of the church, and Dick was there with his stick, about to leave. I hadn't seen him or spoken to him for quite a while. I said how good it was to see him at church after all that he'd been through. And he made some comment about just keep pressing on. I held the door for him, said goodbye, and walked across the car park. And here's what I was thinking. If he can do what he's doing after all that he's been through, what in the world do I have to complain about? Actually, I think God was speaking to me through Dick. And he knew nothing about it. The truth is, I've thought about him 4 or 5 times in the last week. I've thanked God for his testimony. And I've drawn encouragement from the example of a man who just keeps struggling on, who wants to be here in worship despite great difficulties. He loves Christ and he just keeps pressing on. So I'll tell you, I'm really glad that Dick made the effort to come to church last Sunday. I don't know what it did for him, but I know what he did for me. Of course, he wouldn't have known anything about it, except that I phoned him. I said, Dick, I want you to know that just seeing you at church last Sunday was a blessing to me. And then I asked him, of course, if it would be okay if I said that this morning. And in true style, he said, you can use my name. Just don't go too much on the heroics. See, I see a single mother struggling to bring up her children in the faith, and I'm encouraged without anything being said. I see someone with a child who's seriously ill, and they're trusting the Lord in their difficulties. It inspires me. I see someone who's experienced great loss, and they're struggling to hold back the tears, but they're trying to sing because they want to affirm their faith in God, and I'm strengthened. Let me say this especially to some of our older people. You don't know what ministry you have just by your presence, by your smile, by the fact that despite all that you have gone through, you did not give up. Our pastors meet for prayer every Wednesday. Every week we receive a list of folks who are in hospital, confined to home, or enduring some other significant difficulty. It's always printed on a green sheet of paper, so of course we call it the green sheet. I'll tell you, some of the names on the green sheet are an inspiration. All you can do is thank God for some of those folks and pray that you would have grace to be like them. Don't ever underestimate the importance of your staying the course. You are showing the rest of us what it means to persevere. And your faith in these difficulties is part of our testimony to God's grace, and the whole body draws strength from it. Now, you see, when Asaph came to worship, he says, I come into the sanctuary, and here's what God did for me. It straightened out my thinking. And how? Because it's here that I'm reminded of God's truth, and it's here that I meet with God's people. There will be 1,000 ways in which God speaks from one member of the body to another today. And most of them you may know nothing about. Only God himself knows the full extent of ministry that goes on as the body gathers. I entered the sanctuary of God. Isn't that a wonderful thing? Second, I understood their final destiny. Now, not only, you see, does he remember God's truth and meet with God's people, but he, in the sanctuary, considers ultimate outcomes. I understood their final destiny. Now, of course, Asaph is talking about the final destiny of the wicked. Remember that his whole problem began in verse 3 when he was raising the question of why the wicked prosper. And Asaph uses two pictures here that it seems perhaps God brought to his mind when he was in the sanctuary. God does speak to us in wonderful ways, and he gives us two pictures that describe the ultimate outcome of the wicked. The first is a picture of walking on ice. Look at verse 18. Surely you place them on slippery ground. It's talking about the wicked. Now, why has God placed the wicked, or how has God placed the wicked on slippery ground? The answer is God has placed the wicked on slippery ground by prospering them, which is, of course, the whole point of the psalm. That's where we started. Prosperity is a great blessing, but it is slippery ground. The problem with prosperity, and especially the prosperity of the wicked, is that a man or woman without faith in God who prospers will usually become blind to reality. His money will make him feel secure, and that is a slippery place. Remember the words of Jesus about the man who amassed great wealth and then had marvelous plans for all that he was going to do in the future. And God said to him, "You fool," the strongest of words, "You fool," God said, "don't you know that tonight your soul will be required of you?" Now, if prosperity is a slippery place for the wicked, we'd better take note and realize that it must be a slippery place also, therefore, for the righteous. If God has given you money, be thankful, but also be careful. Be thankful, be careful. It's like walking on ice. It really is. Pride can easily come in when God prospers you, and pride comes before a fall. It's like walking on ice, you see. It's a slippery place. Be thankful, be careful. See, that's why Paul says to Timothy, and notice the strength of this language in the New Testament. This is the apostle speaking to a young pastor. And he says, command those who are rich in the present world not to be what? Arrogant. He's talking about believers here. The danger for the believer who has prospered is what? That he'll become arrogant. And Paul says to Timothy, who's just a young pastor, I've often wondered, how in all the world was Timothy supposed to do this? Command those who are rich? That's what the apostle says. Command those who are rich in the present world not to be arrogant or to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God. Thank God for those who give us a model of that, who provides us richly with everything for our enjoyment.
You're listening to Open the Bible with Pastor Colin Smith and a message called Think. It's part of our series, I Almost Gave Up, and it's based on Psalm 73, all about the story of Asaph. We'll be back to the message shortly, so I hope you'll stay with us. If you ever miss one of our messages, you can always catch up or go back and listen again online at our website, openthebible.org.uk. You can also find Pastor Colin's messages as a podcast, and those are on all the podcast sites. Search for Open the Bible UK or follow the link from our website. Open the Bible is supported by our listeners financially, and if that's something you've been considering doing, I hope you'll stay with us, as later on in the programme I'll be talking to Open the Bible's Amanda Cunningham about this month's offer if you're able to start a new direct debit to Open the Bible this month. Back to the message now. Here's Colin.
The danger for the believer who has prospered is what? That he'll become arrogant. And Paul says to Timothy, who's just a young pastor, I've often wondered, how in all the world was Timothy supposed to do this? Command those who are rich? That's what the apostle says. Command those who are rich in the present world not to be arrogant or to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God. So he says, I'm thinking about the destiny of the wicked, and I see that it's like walking on ice. They're going to fall over to their ruin. And then secondly, he says at verse 20, it's like waking from a dream. As a dream when one awakes, so when you arise, O Lord, you will despise them as fantasies. Now, it was Augustine, a great Christian writer, who speaks about a beggar who has a dream. He doesn't expand on it. Let me try and paint the picture for you. In the dream, the beggar wins the lottery. $50 million. And in his dream, he sees the home he will buy. He sees the car he will drive. He sees snowmobiles in winter, jet skis in summer. He sees himself flying first class around the world, the Taj Mahal, all the wonders of the world and all the rest of it. He sees himself cruising the Caribbean. He's dining in the finest of the world's restaurants. But when he wakes up, to his horror, he realizes it was only a dream. The reality is he's a beggar. He's a beggar. Now, Asaph's saying, I realize that is the destiny of the wicked. It's a terrible thing to contemplate. Thinking that they have everything, living the dream, they wake up and find they have nothing. To their horror. C.S. Lewis puts it this way. He says it is to be left utterly and absolutely outside, repelled, exiled, estranged, finally and unspeakably ignored. Now you see, Asaph saying, I came into the sanctuary, and that's where God straightened my thinking out so that I was able to face life. It happened as I remembered the truth. It's what the ark's all about, as I met with God's people. And as I contemplated ultimate outcomes, it began to change my whole perspective. I began to say to myself, if that's the end of the wicked, why in all the world am I envying them? And then, of course, he contemplated not only the destiny of the wicked, but the destiny of the righteous. Look at verse 24. You guide me with your counsel, and afterward you will take me to glory. Now, one of the commentators here points out that there's an interesting parallel between verse 17 and verse 24. If you look at verse 17, then I understood their final destiny. Now, the word translated final destiny literally means their afterward. Their afterward. I understood the afterward of the wicked, and the afterward of the wicked is that they fall over and they're ruined and they wake up and they're disappointed. Now, what about the afterward of the righteous? Well, it's in verse 24 and translated with precisely that term. You guide me with your counsel, and afterward, you see the parallel, you will take me into glory. This is one of the greatest verses in the whole of the Bible. It describes the whole Christian life. You guide me with your counsel, that's what God does for us now, and afterward, you will take me into glory. What a statement. You will take me into glory. You never know what's going to happen when the phone rings, right? Some years ago, I was sitting at my desk in London, and the phone rang. Hello, said this voice I had never heard before. My name is John White. You don't know me? We've never met before. But my wife and I are going to Israel, and we wonder if you'd like to come. Sales call. He continued, though. We'd like to take you, he said, my wife and I, if you'd like to come. Sorry, could you say that again? Well, John and Rosemary belonged to a church in another part of the country. I'd never met them before. They had a great love for Israel, and they had a great love for the preaching of the word. They had apparently been encouraged, unknown to me, by the ministry, and they wanted to give to Karen and to myself the opportunity of seeing the land where Jesus walked. We'll make all the arrangements, they said. You'll just meet us at the airport. If you'd like to come, we'll take you with us. Yeah, you kind of sit at the end of the phone and say, I've never met this guy. I've never spoken to this guy before. Doesn't happen every day, by the way, but it happened. Well, John and Rosemary were experienced travelers. They'd been to Israel several times before. They knew their way around the country. They took us to Israel. They paid for our trip, and we traveled in their company, and they have become dear, dear friends to this day. They took us to Israel. Now, says Asaph, looking up, as it were, by faith into the face of God, he says, you take me to glory. That means you pay the price of getting me there. That means that I travel in your company. That means you are with me every step of the way. That means when I get to crossing the border with all its hazards and with all its fears, you take me into glory. That's the future. And when he takes you into glory, he's taking you into the place with which he is supremely familiar already. And he will spend eternity showing you its delights, to his joy and to yours. You get your eyes focused on that destiny, the whole of life begins to look somewhat different. Remember God's truth. Meet with God's people. Consider ultimate outcomes. When I tried to understand all this, it was oppressive to me till I entered the sanctuary. Then I understood their final destiny. So to wrap it up, here's where we've come. Remember, it's a 5-point turn, and there's more to follow. We're at the second point of a 5-point turn, but boy, Asaph's already well on the way. And this is what he wants us to know. Let me tell you my story, he says. I was facing these problems. My mind was confused. I'm going round and round and round. I almost gave up. I couldn't even see the point of continuing to pursue a godly life at that time. I had to stop, and I had to think. And I found I couldn't do it on my own. It was oppressive to me. I got nowhere till I entered the sanctuary of God. And I remembered God's truth. I met with God's people. It changed the way I was thinking, and that's where God opened my mind, and I saw the afterward of the wicked and the afterward of the godly. And I'm thinking to myself, I actually thought it wasn't worth it. It changed my whole perspective. It got my thinking straight. It made it possible for me to go out into the world and to face the realities of life.
You've been listening to Open the Bible with Pastor Colin Smith and a message called Think, part of our series, I Almost Gave Up. If you ever miss one of the series, don't forget you can always come online to our website, openthebible.org.uk, and there you'll find all the messages which have already gone out on air. You can also find them as a podcast, and those are on all the main podcast sites. Search for Open the Bible and subscribe if you want to receive regular reminders. Also on our website and available as a podcast, Open the Bible Daily, a series of short 2 to 3 minute daily reflections based on Pastor Colin's teaching, read in the UK by Sue McLeish. Open the Bible is broadcast and available online as a result of the generous donations made by our listeners. So if you already give to support the work of Open the Bible, we want to thank you so much. If you're considering giving to support Open the Bible in that way, this month if you're able to set up a new direct debit in the amount of £5 per month or more, or a one-off gift of £50 or more, we'd love to say thank you. Here's Open the Bible's Amanda Cunningham to tell you about our offer this month.
Thanks, David. I really love this book. I know that might be a strange thing to say about a book on grief, but I have recommended this book to so many people. The first time I read it, I was blessed to not be struggling with grief, but I found it so helpful because it is unique in that it was written off the back of Colin counselling grieving couples in church. And so it is full of biblical wisdom and encouragement from the Book of Lamentations, but it's also full of practical suggestions from those couples he counselled. What is a helpful or unhelpful thing to say to someone going through grief? How do we encourage people in their grief from the Bible, but without dismissing their pain? And if you are grieving, then I hope you will be able to see from this book that you are not alone in your pain and that there is hope. So whether you'd like to read this book because you're struggling with grief, or like me, because you would like to think through how to better support someone in their grief, I can't recommend this book highly enough. We would love to send you a free copy when you set up a new direct debit of at least £5 per month, or give a one-off gift of at least £50. We'll also be including 5 specially designed postcards with a verse from Psalm 23, ideal for sending to a friend for encouragement. And if you would like to know what other resources we have on grief, do visit our website at openthebible.org.uk and scroll down until you see our section on grief.
Thanks, Amanda. And you can find full terms and conditions, and you can give online at our website openthebible.org.uk. For Open the Bible and Pastor Colin Smith, I'm David Pick. I hope you'll join us again soon for Open the Bible. You go to church and you read your Bible, but how do you know if you've really grasped the truth? Find out next time on Open the Bible.